Okay, it's won national level road bike time trials, it's won hilltop finishes, it's won arguably the hardest NRS stage in the last decade, it's won criteriums. It's going to be a harder review, guys. I'm looking for problems, okay? Now, let's do it. Let's talk about the Devel A01 frame set. So I reckon there's probably two different types of people watching this video. There's you guys, the subscribers, the ones who probably at this point think there's some sort of conspiracy theory as to why he hasn't reviewed this bike yet. What's wrong? Is there something wrong with it? Why isn't he doing it? The elephant in the room. But then I'm sure there's heaps of you who are following this thread that seems to be a common thread on YouTube at the moment about, well, cheap Asian bike frames, how good are they? How they compare to mainstream bikes and all that kind of stuff. Well, I can guarantee you this. We have the best body of work when it comes to comparing these bikes against mainstream bikes, and I reckon I've got some thoughts on that as well. So let's quickly address the delay in doing this vlog. We are 12 months into riding and racing this bike, and not many reviewers on YouTube wait that long to do a review. The main reason for this delay was two things. It was the distribution of it and basically the recommended retail price. Now, I will put some links below to some distribution points and to some recommended retail pricing that they are using. I will warn you, however, that much of this distribution at this point is Asian based. Now, I do know that about 17% of you are from that part of the world, and that will mean a lot to you. But for the rest of us, at least now we have a reference point. We know where this bike sits in the hierarchy, in the pyramid of the bike industry. And the answer is, well, we are cheaper than a Cervelo or a Focus or definitely a Trek and those sort of things, but we're more expensive than, say, a Pardus or a Merida or a selle bike. So this is the point in the YouTube bike review where the reviewer goes on about the ride, the feel, the comfort, the stiffness, etc., etc., etc. And they find problems. The problem is we're really struggling for problems. Look, it's not the lightest bike in the world. The build that you can see behind me weighs in at just over 7.3 kilos. And sure, it doesn't have wind tunnel tested graphics and metrics to sprout to you. And sure, there were a couple of finicky things like the saddle rails, which would just wonk off slightly right to left for the first incarnation of them, though fair play to Devel when we told them about that, and they sent through a fixed version of that saddle rail for everyone to use. So listened to our feedback. Look, I think it's completely impossible to just review a frame alone. You have to talk about the build, and I think it plays a huge role on the experience that you have on the bike. And the most obvious thing for us has been the tubeless wheels, because I'm riding at 55 PSI, guys. So if this is a really harsh ride, I couldn't tell you, because the experience that I'm having at that tire pressure is never going to be harsh. The bottom bracket is another really interesting part. So I can remember when Felice was first building this bike up, he basically said to me that he'd never seen as clean a bottom bracket. Now that didn't mean anything to me at the time, but it was only, well, 12 months later that I'm talking to Jesse about, come on, we've got to find some problems here. We've got to talk about something in this vlog. And he said, well, can't find negatives. One of the positives he has was the bottom bracket. He said he hadn't replaced the bottom bracket all year, and he'd ridden this thing through slop. In his experience with bikes previously, he'd not had that experience. And that's a really interesting point, because this is where we find ourselves with this bike, comparing it to what we had ridden previously. All the guys have come from different bikes. We're talking S-Works Tarmacs, we're talking obviously Bianchi XR4s, we're talking Focuses, we're talking Treks.
Before this I had two really flash bikes. So Cannondale Super 6 Evo high mod, super light, super responsive. Then after that had S-Works Tarmac SL6, not so light, very aero, super responsive also.
And when I am confronting the guys to tell me problems, tell me about the comparison, they're kind of bored. They're just saying, well, Chris, it's fine.
It's a really solid bike. Like, it's a really comfy bike to ride, yet it's not sloppy. I think anyone who jumps on any high-end road bike now and go, ooh, you know, this is the best bike I've ever ridden. It's a bit of hobnob, to be honest. Like,
this is where I think this question sort of goes, because if this bike is reminding people of their Trek Madone, their Bianchi XR4, their Focus Zalco Max, are all bikes the same? The bike itself performs at an elite level. It's won more races for the guys on our team that the major brand bikes that they had in previous years won. It's a good bike. But what about this other question? Because, as I said in the very beginning, there is this common thread on YouTube at the moment about, well, comparing cheap Asian brands to mainstream brands. There's two problems with this narrative, specifically in this particular example. The first is, I just think it's a disservice to Devel, because this is a premium high quality product using their own mold, designed their own mold. This is not a cheap copy. A really, really impressive bike. So I just think it's a disservice to them to go down that narrative. The other problem I have with that narrative, I am brands. I mean, look at me, right? I've ridden Bianchi bikes, wear Rapha clothes, Oakley sunglasses, Nike shoes, Apple Watch. Look at me, covered in brands, head to toe. And I know for a fact that I pay a premium to use those brands. And I also know that, for example, my XR4 came from a factory not very far from this bike. But I knew that, and it didn't bother me, because I was about the heritage and the brand and the allegiance and the 1842 or whatever the bloody thing was made, I don't know. Because on the one hand, sort of in my professional life, I'm all about sort of small apps, Kickstarter programs coming from nowhere and developing up. Whereas when it comes to bikes and brands, for some reason I'm clinging on to this, oh, it's been around for 200 years, it must know more. I didn't quite expect this vlog to take this turn, for me to be questioning my own life choices about this. But at the end of the day, we have a bike that works really, really well. It's probably half the price of the bike that I previously owned. And, guys, it's a really nice bike. It's a really, really nice bike. Look, I'm sure you've sat there through this whole thing and gone, well, whatever, they sponsor the team. Of course he's going to go on and on about how good it is. All right, well, two things. The performance of the bike speaks for itself. And the other is, I think we just got to be mature enough on this channel to realise that bikes, bike equipment, comes and goes. It just comes and goes. This space is not particularly relevant to it. So I got no skin in this game, all right? That said, if you would like me to talk about the specifics of equipment at this level, what riders get, how much they get, what do they pay, all this kind of stuff, I would love to. I would love to burst some urban myths that exist, particularly in this country, about how that is actually handled. I realise it's a pretty niche subject, so let me know down below if you would like me to do that. Apart from that, guys, Ben Carmen's doing pretty well. I'll put some details down below if you want to send him some paraphernalia. He's a big reader, that's all I will say. If you do want to send him some books, do that. The other is, I will be doing some Festive 500 vlogging. It won't be daily. Let's just say we came to an arrangement at home about how that should work. And the third is Merry Christmas. Happy New Year, 2021. Thank God, hey, 2021. All right. Oh, I forgot to say, J Vine. Obviously, we know the J Vine situation. You know, there you go. Turned a rider professional on Zwift. Does the bike count for that? I did notice that he was running the Boras on the Zwift finals. Did anyone else notice that? You know, marginal gains. All right, guys. How good are my end screens? Talk to you soon. What was that? Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.